Hey everyone, it's Pastor Adam
Pastor Bob.
and this is number 3, I believe, of Unafraid. So it is, yes. And so you know the drill if you've been with us. We're gonna share the screen here, and Pastor Bob and I are gonna riff on this one. So what is this one? This is session 3, failure, disappointing others. Never happens with me. I'm always never disappointing anybody. And insignificance. Great. Here we go. You ready?
Yes.
All right.
Well, as we gather together for this session, we're going to be talking about some really important things we experience in our own lives. We're going to talk about the fear of failure, the fear of criticism, the fear of rejection, the fear of disappointing other people, the fear of insignificance and loneliness. And I see a lot of head shaking going on right now.
Yes.
Because these are the kind of things that all of us as human beings wrestle with and experience in our lives. And so we're going to look to see how does that fear affect our lives? How do we overcome that kind of fear? And I think about the paralysis that comes, especially when I think about the fear of failure. If I am afraid of failing, I'm afraid of embarrassing myself, I'm afraid of being criticized, if that fear is too strong, we're all going to feel that fear. But if I don't overcome that fear, and in essence, the definition of courage is in some ways overcoming our fears and doing what we're afraid to do. If I don't overcome that fear, I'm not going to accomplish anything, do anything, really experience any of the great experiences of life. So fear of failure is one of those things that can be it can stop us from truly living. I think about, in addition to that, the fear of loneliness and the fear of rejection from people, and how many people live with that sense of just being afraid that I'm never going to have, maybe I'm never going to have a spouse, maybe I'm never going to have love, I'm never going to experience that. And in particular, there's been, over the last few years, an increase in the number of suicides. In the community where I live, there's been a huge increase in suicides. We've seen now it's 20 suicides in the last 6 months. Not all of them church members, many of them family members or friends, but people who are feeling either that life is meaningless or hopeless, or I'm unloved and I'm never going to have it or experience love. I mean, this fear that it's never going to get any better, and that whatever I'm experiencing, this is the way it's always going to be. So I guess I'd like to ask you first, when and where have you experienced a fear of criticism or a fear of failure? And did you ever experience that to a degree that you didn't go ahead and do the thing? Maybe it just kept you from moving ahead. And I'd like to start with you, Carlos.
All right. Can we pause for a second?
Yes.
Of course we can, because I did it. Before they answer that question, I wanted to answer that question. I mean, I think it's clearly, as pastors, I am always wondering if I'm going to get criticized for what I say, or even how I say things from the pulpit or during worship, or even over Zoom like we're doing right now.
Right.
I know that people are hearing things differently than I might have meant them. I also know that both you and I sometimes talk off the top of our heads, and that works most of the time, and then sometimes it doesn't, and you have to backpedal. And so I'm always worried about that. I don't know if it doesn't stop me from doing my thing on a Sunday morning or whenever I'm leading people, but it's always there in the back of my head that I might have messed up or offended somebody.
Yeah, that is basically, I think, my walk through life. Heck, I go through, like, I'll have a conversation with someone and walk away being like, "Oh, you idiot, why did you say that?" Even though it's probably not a big deal.
Yeah.
But yeah, especially with preaching, we say a lot of words.
Right.
And
it's live, like we don't get to take it back.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And yeah. And I've always appreciated, though, I remember one time I preached a sermon, and as I was preaching it, I was like, "Oh, this is not going where I intended." Right.
Right. Yeah.
Like, even I was like, this is not what you mean.
Yeah.
And I appreciated the one person that I was thinking of, in a way, because I was like, as I was preaching, I'm like, this isn't what I mean. And I know that this one person in particular is going to be a little bit like, what's going on?
Yeah.
And that person actually called me later in the week and said, I was really kind of bothered by what you said. I really appreciated that the person took the time to say and to think enough of me to say, this bothered me.
Yeah.
But allowed me to apologize.
Right.
And took the apology because it was really heartfelt.
Yeah.
But the other thing I remember or tell myself every week is I have the next week, that's the one nice thing is it's not just that one
as long
day.
as you didn't screw up so badly they fire you this week, right? You get to come back next week,
right?
Be like,
right.
Well, you didn't like it, well, you get to hear from Pastor Adam this week.
Right.
Yeah. I also think like the loneliness and the isolation is obviously pertinent right now, and the disconnection from people is absolutely the thing that drives most suicides, absolutely exacerbates any current mental health issues are going to get worse the more you're disconnected. And addictions are driven by loneliness as well, right? Because we just want to negate that pain that we were feeling. And by the way, I mean, you don't have to be just by yourself in your house to feel lonely. I mean, you can be surrounded by kids and family and feel like they're not getting you, feel like they just not understanding who you are, trying to communicate, and that can feel very lonely in the midst of your own family, your own friends.
You have a camera in my house, Adam.
I know, right? And you could be surrounded by activity and busyness and kids and still feel like I'm alone in this.
Right. Yeah. I've always kind of looked at, the stories of Judas and Peter, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, we always look at Judas and think, oh, that horrible, that horrible jerk turned Jesus in. But what Peter does isn't much better, right? It's not any better. He distances himself from Jesus. He could have stood up and said, no, what these people are saying is wrong. They're lying. He could have been a voice for Jesus, right? I mean, he betrays Jesus at least as much as Judas does in a way. Because he doesn't stand up and say, no, what they're saying is a lie. Right. So Jesus had nobody on his side. Yeah. And I think and so when I've looked at their stories, and then Judas goes and hangs himself, right? And Peter somehow holds on to something, I've always thought about it that loss as part of it is a loss of hope that God's forgiveness isn't for me. That's Judas and Judas's mind, right?
Right.
Like there's a hopelessness to Judas that Peter ends up not having. But also in the stories, you kind of brought this to light for me just now. In the stories, Peter is still in the community.
Yeah.
He still has that sense of people, though, kind of supporting him or being with him. He never breaks away, and Judas doesn't have that. So I don't know what I'm trying to say, Adam, except I think I guess my one of my things is that one of the places where we maybe can find some of that sense of hope is, well, loneliness is I don't know. Obviously what I'm saying is community is extremely important. Right. It's just really important, and we all need it.
So. And not just community, but healthy community.
Right.
Will pull you through. I mean, because you can certainly have a really bad home life or a family that's very dysfunctional, and it's not healthy, and it's not going to help you with your loneliness. But yeah, I mean, obviously, like our churches are awesome, and they pull people through situations.
Well, yeah, I guess that's So Peter obviously found not just a community, but he found a group of people who were willing to walk with him through the mistake that he made. Right. To support him in those, to forgive him, and to continue to walk with him through it. And we don't always have that, but where can we find it?
Right.
And can we? So.
Can we? Yeah. All right. Cool. Oh, there it is.
I wonder if you have.
Yeah, English is not my first language, and when I had the opportunity to go to seminary, I was blessed to receive a scholarship for me to go through a very highly academic institution, and I was so afraid of failing that I put at risk my relationship at home with my wife, because I was just trying to overextend of the things that I could do, and the difficulties of me trying to write academic papers, and it was a very, very, very miserable time. And to be honest, there were moments in which I felt alone. There were moments in which I just felt that I was completely just is full of stress, and I am thankful because of our connection with the United Methodist Church. I was able to find a group of people that walk along with me in that phase, but I was terrified about just failing.
Yeah, that's understandable. How about you, Ginger?
Well, for me, it's finding the courage to post a blog post, to hit the send button, knowing not everybody's going to agree with this, and not everybody's going to interpret it the same way I do. But I was at a neighborhood party one night, and I was about to quit. I was like, maybe I'm not meant to be a writer. It's too scary. And I was writing on some opinions that were hot topics at the time, and people weren't agreeing with me and posting their comments. And so I was about to throw in the towel, and a man at a neighborhood party said, I don't go to church. I don't want to go to church, but I get on my wife's Facebook on Sunday morning, and I read your post, and that's my church. And I thought, you know what? That's the sign I needed to keep doing it, no matter the criticism, because there's somebody, and so every time I pray, God, let this touch who you need it to touch, and hit send. But I've had to I want to just hide. I don't want to put it out there because of the criticism. I want everyone to love everything I do, and if they don't. So I've just had to accept I'm going to serve those that I'm called to serve, and there will be criticism.
Yeah. How about you, Marie? Do you struggle at all with the fear of failure or fear of criticism or rejection?
Well, yes. One of the times in my career as a nurse, I remember a failure with presenting a class to a group of nurses. It was my very first time presenting that class. It was one of my very first times teaching nurses. And I was really concerned about how I was going to be able to present, because I wasn't a public speaker at that time. And so I thought about how I'm going to do this. And when I looked out at them, I thought, I'm not doing this very well. I'm feeling like I'm failing. So I said to my director afterwards, I just don't think that I did this very well. And she was encouraging. What lessons did you learn from this? So take what you think is a failure and use it as an opportunity to improve on what you're doing. So it was a failure for me, but it also was an opportunity to improve in what I was doing.
Yeah, that's excellent. Yeah, it strikes me that you cannot live life and have an impact on the world, do anything that's bold or that's going to have make a difference if you're not willing to face criticism, and you're going to be criticized. And the people who make a difference in the world are the folks who refuse to give into that fear, and they continue to move forward. So I'm wondering, in your own life, when we think about loneliness, how have you wrestled with loneliness? Do you have
Just a real quick pause, unless you've got something else you want to say. But Richard Rohr says he prays for a daily humiliation.
I'm sorry?
A daily humiliation.
Oh, he prays.
He prays that God would actually provide him an opportunity to screw up, and to make sure that keeps you humble and to fail. And it's like a good thing. How she was describing it, it's an opportunity to learn. It's an opportunity to stay humble. It's an opportunity to risk and to not have it work out. It's all part of it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, the other thing that they all said in their own way is fear makes us feel alone.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what the guy, he's talking about seminary. Fear made him feel alone. Like he had to do this all on his own. And then I wish I remembered their names, but the woman who writes the blogs, the fear And you know, the fear of being criticized made her feel like she was in this on her own.
Yeah.
And so, so where do we find those voices though, when we do recognize, or, you know, that we need something, when we do because I think that's, for me, the thing is, like, when I feel afraid, part of me knows that there's, well, not a part of me, I know that there's something wrong. Like, either I've done something that is making, you know, that's, or something's happening. And where can I go to hear voices that aren't necessarily saying it's going to be okay, you're great, but who can talk with me or listen to me honestly. And I think when I was hearing their stories, that's what each of them somehow found.
Right.
To help them break through that fear.
Right. And it's not always your spouse, or your,
no.
You know, it's more often a friend or a pastor or even a mentor of some kind, or, you know, sometimes if we don't have any of that, people will just talk to strangers. But, you know, you right, as pastor, I've clearly gotten people who just kind of like want to just talk, you know, and need to talk. But but if you don't have that, we need those good friends who we can just be totally honest with us, and we can be honest with. Yeah. All right.
You ever wrestle with it, a fear of being unloved or a fear of loneliness, and how do you deal with that as you know, people of faith? Marie, any thoughts on that?
Well, to combat that loneliness or that feeling of loneliness, I make sure that I'm part of groups that I can associate with, like a clergy women's group, or my family, being more intentional about being with my family. Because I'm single, and so I think about these things of how do I create community for myself, and making sure that I have positive people that I'm surrounded with. And so intergenerational type of relationships as well, not just people that are my age, but having conversations with people that are older than me, that are younger than me, that can share in some of the same things that I like and things that I don't particularly care about, that I can develop an interest in.
Yeah, that's good.
One of the healing experiences or the healing moments, it's I need to share a meal with people. Like, I feel like just being at the table is just a wonderful spiritual connection, like fostering those relationships that my wife and I also experience. And my wife is not a Spanish-speaking individual, and so in the community that I serve, sometimes she also feels very lonely. And so I need to help her, and I need to help myself to foster things outside of our church and the community. And like I said, it just happens to foster those moments of having conversation. And now we're having a 3-year-old, and it's more difficult to do a lot of things. But I feel like in order to stay afloat and to survive, we need to make the time to.
Absolutely. Ginger, there's a lot of conversation today about social media and the impact it's had on, you know, real relationships. And so we can say, well, social media is real relationships, but, you know, we're finding less young people getting out to come to youth group, less young people, you know, getting involved in actual physical connections because they're connecting with each other all the time. Do you, how do you see that? And, or, you know, why is it not enough just to be able to connect over Facebook, Twitter, Instagram?
Yeah, I think for me, it's a kind of, or my theory on it is there's an energy that needs to be exchanged when people are together. They need to look in your eyes. They need to feel your energy, and we don't get that on devices. And I think that's why it takes.
Yeah.
I feel like we need to skip this part right now because it's the only way that we can.
I mean, she's not wrong that there's something happening when we're with each other. But
no, she's not.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, not right now. Don't touch hands. Don't shake hands. Don't touch your face. Yeah, I hear you. No big parties. No youth group gatherings. Sorry.
Right.
Yeah.
Energy to go be with somebody, and yet it feeds you. And I love being with people and get my energy from being with people. And So I had to kind of look at solitude versus loneliness, you know, because I quickly go into loneliness, like, oh, I'm all alone and everybody else is out doing something fun. And, you know, reading social media makes me feel like I'm missing something, that fear of missing out that you talk about in your book. And I had to turn that into a spiritual practice and be alone with God and appreciate solitude instead of letting myself wallow in that pity of loneliness. So I've had to really work at that because I do love being with people, and social media doesn't do it for me. It takes that energy of being in the presence of another person.
I want to wrap it up by asking about the role, because you've really talked about this well, this idea of solitude versus loneliness, and that one of the companions we have in our life when we may feel all alone is our faith in God. How have you experienced that friendship with God, and how do you cultivate a sense of God's presence for people who maybe don't feel God? How do we sense God's presence? How do we feel that we're not alone? Marie, any thoughts on your own spiritual life and how you experience God's presence in your life?
Sharing time with friends in a moment of prayer. I have a dinner group that I meet with once a month, and it's good to be able to be at the same table, but we also keep each other in prayer. And then there's a clergy women's group that I'm a part of that we gather and pray together, sing together, and share each other's concerns and keep each other lifted in prayer. I'm finding also the practice of intentionally every morning writing down my conversations with God to myself and writing in my journal of where God is speaking to me, and then the concerns that I have that I want to lift up to God, putting that down on paper, because next week I may not remember exactly what those concerns are, but I want to make sure that I have been intentional about sharing those concerns from my heart.
Excellent. So there's probably not a human being around who doesn't fear failure. Very few of us who don't fear disappointing other people. We all worry a bit about living meaningless lives or insignificant lives, and sometimes we're afraid of being alone, and that probably means we're human. But it also points to the fact that there are things that we can do, we must do, and when we do them, when we press through those feelings, we find that we live with courage and hope. So thank you for a great and meaningful conversation. Look forward to our next conversation together.
So I didn't really get into this, but solitude is a spiritual practice that is the main spiritual practice of combating loneliness. And they kind of got at this, that there's a difference between solitude and loneliness, but the difference is you are invited into solitude by a god or by a retreat presenter, you know, and you willfully go into a place where you are all alone and maybe even silent, and you're ready and open to learn from that. And that's how you learn how to be alone with yourself and with God. But if you are forced into solitude, then that's it's not invitational. It's not a gift. It's not a blessing. It's a very anxiety producing, depressing, lonely place if you're forced into solitude.
Right. Well, you know, I was talking to my mom the other day, and she was telling me that she goes, you know, my dad, your dad and I wouldn't be doing much anyway, but it's the fact that I don't have a choice that's driving me crazy.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And that really really spoke to me when she was basically talking about the not having a choice, and why. Because I was like, what is wrong with you? I mean, you know, kind of to my mom. I didn't say that to her. I was just going, But well, you know, I was listening, but in my mind, I'm like, well, you know, you guys wouldn't be doing that much anyway. When she said, I know we wouldn't be doing that much anyway, but at least before I had a choice.
Right.
So yeah, I hear you.
And the same is true on the opposite spectrum. I mean, there are times in which I feel like I don't have a choice, but I have to be with people, even but I'm not in a place where I want to be with people, but that's just the nature of your job, or you've got an event you have to go to, and that there's a forced connection there that doesn't work either. that doesn't combat the loneliness. And usually you end up going to an event or something and you're just kind of like, meh, and you're just disconnected and not enjoying. Yeah. All right, who is our expert for today?
I don't know. I'm excited to find out.
It's the great reveal.
I'm delighted to have with me Christian Sid as our expert today. She is the CEO and president of the Serenity Counseling Center in Gallatin, Tennessee. She's done this for 10 years there, and she's been a therapist caring for people, helping them find healing and hope. And Christian, thank you so much for joining us today. It's a delight to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So if you could, this study we're doing is on fear and how prevalent fear is and how we wrestle with our fears and how we can live unafraid. I'm just curious, in your counseling practice, how prevalent is fear? How big of an issue is fear for people today?
Fear is huge in human behavior. It's something that we all face, but it's something that at times can be crippling depending on our confidence level, our self-worth, and our environment and how confident we feel supported. So fear, sometimes we do not jump into some things or make decisions for the fear of rejection or not fitting in.
Do you see very many people who struggle with the desperate need to please other people, to try to, where they are, I think of people pleasers, and many of us, I'm a pastor, I'm a people pleaser, but you can see that almost go to a unhealthy place. Do you see much of that in your practice?
Absolutely, and we call that codependency. It is definitely that people pleaser, wanting someone to be happy with you. You're always giving, going out of your way to make that person happy with you. It's very unhealthy. It is very unhealthy, and it also breaks down family relationships, where it's very hard for individuals within a family to think independently because they're so codependent on how that other family member has thought in the past or what they will think in a certain situation in the future. So it kind of holds back that independence of having their own opinion of something.
Can you think of an example of somebody that you had worked with who had been severely codependent, and then how they became set free, or maybe the story of how they finally found liberation from that?
A lot of times in the unhealthy codependency, it does, push the other person away, such as in friendships or relationships or marriages. And just recently, that happened in a very unhealthy, very toxic relationship between, early 20s, a couple, and that relationship actually ending, showed that person that they could have, some power and self-worth and self-value without having to manipulate or control the person in the relationship.
All right, thank you. And finally, I guess I'd ask about the sense of meaning or purpose in people's lives. One of the chapters in the book is about our fear of living meaningless lives, or a fear that we will not have accomplished everything we were to accomplish. Recently, I was speaking to a couple of young people, and I asked them, what's your greatest fear? And they said, our fears, each of them separately said, my fear is that I will have missed out on accomplishing what I was supposed to accomplish, or that my life will have been ultimately meaningless. What do you see much of that, where people are living afraid that they might not live into their purpose, they might not fulfill whatever they were supposed to fulfill as a human being?
Yeah, and a lot of times when I sit down with individuals, it's when they finally settled into their careers, maybe, early to mid 40s. And they say, okay, I think I've settled and found my career, but finding my purpose in life, what is that I need to seek or search? And a lot of times it's really putting things in perspective for clients and saying, what about your life that you've accomplished at this point that you feel isn't satisfying or good?
Okay, very good. What role does faith play in finding healing for people, in particular in addressing their fears of failure or meaninglessness or loneliness?
I would say for those who are believers and they're lost, or they've come to a dry spell, faith plays a huge aspect. I feel like even for unbelievers, even when we talk about faith, it's very important to begin to believe in something greater than yourself. In faith, we're not really giving or doing for ourselves. We are truly serving and doing for others without anything in reward. And that's really what our walk in our life should be about, is giving and serving, knowing that there is something higher, than ourselves, that's going to be the ultimate reward in life.
Thank you so much. It's been a joy to talk to you today, Christian. Thank you for sharing with us, and God bless you.
God bless you too. Thank you for having me.
Thanks. I appreciated so much Christian's emphasis on how faith plays a role in finding healing from the fear of failure, the fear of rejection, and the fear of being unloved. I think about the word grace, and that's what comes to mind when I consider the emphasis in the chapters that you've been studying this week. Grace, this idea that you don't have to earn love, it's already given to you, that you are already important and you matter to God. Your life has meaning to God. And when in our faith we trust that, we find the fears begin to dissipate. I love my children. I love them more than I could possibly explain. I love them not because of anything they've done, but because of who they are. They are mine. They are my children. And this is how God feels about us. And when we can rest secure in the love of God, when we know our lives have meaning and purpose to Him, then we find the fear of failure, the fear of rejection, the fear of meaningless lives, the fear of being alone begins to dissipate. And we can live unafraid with courage and hope.
Okay, there you go.
There you go.
Wow. A couple things that were sparking for me is that it's not the what of what you're doing, right? That makes you valuable. Certainly not when it comes to a faith perspective. However, at the same time, the very recipe for burnout is not doing too much. It's just not knowing why I'm doing so much. It's the underlying condition of what is purpose is thrown around. That word's thrown around, but the why. Why am I a pastor? Why am I doing a Zoom call with Pastor Bob right now? Why? Not just because I'm supposed to or because it's my job, but there's got to be something internally motivating me to do these things, or I'm burnt out and I don't want to do any of it.
Right.
And
yeah, there are 3 questions that I have asked my committees at this church. So the first question is what do you do? So the second question is, why is it important? And then the third question is, how can other people help you?
Mm-hmm.
And what's great about those questions is that I very seldom ask myself them.
Yeah, you make everybody else do the work. I know.
Well, but what's so funny is because as you were talking, I'm like, those are like really, I think, like for me, if I really took the time to answer them myself, what am I doing? Why is it important? And how can other people help me? I think it would kind of help it would help focus who I am and what I do, right? And also connect me more to, I think what in some ways God has in store for me too,
right?
Especially that why is it important, And I'm sure you've had this where you've been on a roll of preaching for weeks at a time, and you get to a point where you're like, why am I doing this? Like, it feels like I'm just like filling 10 to 15 minutes of people's lives, with words. And so having to step back and really consider, why am I doing this? Has kind of, I've done it a few times in my 20 some odd years of preaching, where I've stepped back and been like, oh, and it's not always an easy answer for me. So
agree. It's interesting because I think maybe what we're getting at is not only is fear of being isolated and fear of being alone a reality with our social communities, but there's a fear within me of not knowing who I am. There might be a disconnect inside of me between what I'm doing and why I'm doing it, and am I really living out who I'm supposed to be, right? And I think that's a particular form of loneliness, that a loneliness of one, I guess, that I think God wants to be part of as well. That God's not interested in me being that disjointed inside of myself. And it happens when you are going through the motions of whatever career you're in. I mean, like, and you're just kind of like, I just got to turn out this project. I just got to do this task. And then you lose that why.
Well, but now is like, here we are, you know, people, again, going back to this loneliness or this isolation that we're in, the solitude that we've not chosen.
Right.
The question is okay, here I am, you know, there's a lot of wrestling going on in my house about, you know, kind of what's the point, you know, a lot of wrestling in my house with my children of kind of like, yeah, what's the point? What am I doing? Why is it even important? Like their schoolwork to their social lives. I mean, and it's hard right now to wrestle with that stuff.
Right. Yeah. Beyond the why right now of we need to be safe and not spread the virus.
Right.
Which is true, but it's not enough for a life, you know, or a community. It's not a good enough reason. It's not a good enough why.
No.
So why do I have to finish my schoolwork then? Right. I mean, like,
right.
Exactly. Yeah. Why? Why are we gathering for church on Sunday morning still?
Right.
Okay. And those are, yeah, I suppose that's our job as fathers and pastors to help people answer those questions.
Mm-hmm. But what's nice about right now, Adam, is that I hadn't really considered the question, like, to raise with my kids about what are they about, kind of where can they find, I mean, we talk and stuff, but the actual like question about where are you finding meaning, or what are you learning about yourself in this, or what can we learn together, or what can we find out about who we are and what's going on, you know? It's yeah, these are good questions to be asking.
Yeah. And I think the answers to those questions will be as unique as your individual kids, right?
Yes.
But also,
and our churches too.
And our churches too. But answering those questions is how we gain that collective wisdom about what is really going on. How is God at work in all this? Right. What are we being led toward? And how can we make this time fruitful for all of us as individuals and as church communities, so that we come out of this better? Yeah. All right. Any last thoughts?
No. You?
No, I'm good. That was good. Thank you for making us all ponder why. Right?
Yeah.
Go home and ponder why. All right.
Yes.
We will be doing this again next week. I think no, go ahead.
One other thing.
Yeah.
We will be doing this again. If you are feeling lonely.
Yeah.
Because that's part of what this was about.
Right.
Please, please, please reach out to Adam or to me or to a friend. Don't just, please, I know it's so hard when you're feeling lonely, when you're feeling alone. I know it's hard to reach out to somebody because, you know, I know that when I feel alone, it's hard for me to reach out to somebody because I don't want to bring them down, or because I don't think they're going to get it. But there are a lot of people out there who are feeling the same way as you, and also who want to help. So
yep.
Phone a friend.
You have absolute permission to just call somebody, even us, and just be like,
yes,
I'm alone right now. Just, you know, I need someone to talk to. And that's how you can start the conversation. And we'll be like, yep, get it. We're here too. Yeah.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Good word. All right, everyone. Peace.
Peace.